Alright, so in this video we're going to break down how to do single leg training patterns correctly and how to screen them to make sure that yourself or whoever you are working with has the ability to even get into single leg positions before you start loading them and training them. They're relatively simple, where we basically take the three major single leg movement patterns, the lunge, the split squat, and the single leg RDL, and we just check for a few things for stability and control, again, before we start loading the pattern. So the first one is relatively simple. It's just the normal split squat. What we have the individual do is get into a split stance, and the stance is going to be dictated on the individual's limb length. And what we're looking for here is when they lunge or when they do the split squat, can they get 90 degrees of flexion in both knees? This front shin is pretty vertical with the knee tracking over the toe, so a little bit forward lean is okay, and that the upper body stays erect. And what we're looking for is, can they, hands on the back of the head, work the split squat pattern without losing balance. Now if I show you this way, another thing we're looking for, again, both knees at 90. This front thigh is going to be parallel to the ground. This back thigh should be perpendicular with the ground, and the torso is erect. We're also trying to make sure that there's no deviation of the knee away from a straight line over the big toe or the middle of the foot. And so what we're looking for there is, can the individual with a decent base of support, both feet planted on the ground, create the single leg movement pattern. From there, we're going to go to the lunging pattern. Similar, depending on how far or how tall the individual is, they'll take a bigger step back. We're looking for 90 degrees of bend in both knees, front thigh parallel, and then back up. We're looking for the individual to do this about 5 to 10 times. Smooth, upper body stays erect, 90 degrees bend. And again, we're seeing if there's the deviation, right? So does the individual have the knee track outside the foot? Does it bow in? Do they have to lean too far forward to get out of the split squat position? Now, there are variations of the split squat or the lunge where somebody can lean, but for the sake of testing the pattern, we want to make sure that the individual can control reciprocally stepping forward and back while keeping the torso erect, right? So the last one that we look at, relatively simple, is the single leg RDL or the single leg hinge. In this variation, the hands go out to the side so that they brace through their trunk, shoulders stay retracted, brace through their pelvis. They're creating the single leg, kind of a deadlift or a hinge pattern from the down hip. So we've gone from 2 feet planted on the ground, most base of support, to reciprocally stepping forward and back in the split squat, to this single leg RDL pattern. That is the most difficult because now the individual has the smallest base of support, which is just the 1 foot on the ground. And we are really looking at, does the individual have stability at the hip, down through the foot, to control motion. Now when we look at this, a little bit of knee bend is okay. We want to make sure that the back leg stays pretty straight, those shoulders stay retracted, and the movement's coming from the hip. We don't want to see them lose stability through their trunk and lean towards the ground. That's why our arms stay at our sides with the shoulders back, and that they are lifting the back leg, not going into kind of a squat pattern again where they bend this knee to get low. So we're seeing if they can actually hinge from the hip. So if an individual is good with all those patterns, you can start loading them. Now, if somebody goes through either the lunge or the split squat or the hinge and the knee doesn't track right, or they lose balance especially, you can break it down a little further and see where they're finding issues with their stability. So the first one is just an eyes closed, single leg up, and they're balancing. And what we're looking at here, so the individual have the strength from the hip down through the floor, and we're only looking for about 10 seconds. So from there, does the hip through the knee to the ankle specifically, right? So the engagement through the lower muscles of the leg up to their hip have control. And if not, then you know that the lower leg is probably where they're finding issues with their stability. If they fall over within that 10-second range, eyes closed, because we take away the ability of the individual to look around you, and so we cut away that feedback. So it's specifically seeing if the individual has stability and to squeeze through the lower leg up to the hip. We can see if it's the hip specifically by taking them to a half kneel position. From here, same idea, take an inline lunge, so the knee in line with the toe, Right here we go eyes closed, and we just see if they can hold this position for 10 seconds. Being that the front foot is planted, now we're looking at if this hip can control staying neutral. Again, 10 seconds. Now, if they start wobbling a whole lot, or if they put their foot down, you know that's where the issue is. So if I'm on my single leg pattern, right, and I start to lose balance, we know that it's the lower quadrant of the leg. If we're in the half kneel, they start losing balance, that's a sign that some kind of intervention for stability in the hip would be best served when trying to break down and assess the single leg training pattern. So very quick, very straightforward, the 3 basic movement patterns we do for single leg training, and you're seeing where an individual is strongest, what you can load, and if you should load those patterns based off of what you see from just body weight movement and body weight control. And then these two, the single leg standing and the half kneeling, eyes closed, will tell you specifically if it's the lower leg or the upper leg or the hip that is causing issues for stability when someone's doing any of those patterns.